Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I'm very happy to welcome Elwin Robinson here, who is the founder of Genetics Insights. And we're going to talk about what he does and I guess have a great conversation about genetics. But before we get started, Elwin, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I grew up with two parents who were both really into alternative health stuff. So I guess I was destined to ultimately go down this road. My father was into all these crazy diets. First few years that I grew up, I think I only ate like a very strict macrobiotic diet, for instance. My mother was ill throughout most of her life with she had cancer several times, and she ended up dying a bit quite young. And she always ordered all kinds of stuff. The house was filled up with supplements and herbs and this and that. And she did like medical mainstream stuff as well, but she kind of did everything every time that she got it. And my dad was a biochemist. Both of them were teachers. So that's my background. And obviously, when you have two parents who are into alternative health, you are not. So I kind of rebelled against that. I partied, took lots of drugs, smoked, drank everything that you're not supposed to do, ate, lived off chocolate bars and coffee and pizza and all that kind of stuff until my late 20s, and my health started to suffer. And long story short, eventually kind of, learned my own stuff and turned it around and set up a business helping people with their health. Guess that's the short version.
Genetics has a lot to do with whether you gain and lose weight.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the answer is yes and no. And that's true for a lot of these things. So does genetics have a lot to do with whether you get the C word, that I just mentioned? Does it have a lot to do with whether you have heart disease? Does it have to do with whether you get diabetes? Does it have a lot to do with all of these kind of issues and much more niche issues? Does it have a lot to do with whether you have sinus issues, whether you have urinary tract infections, whether you have this, that, the other? The answer is yes and no. So the yes is that, and I've seen this for myself now in, so many anecdotal examples as well as research papers and all the rest of it, that if you have a certain genetic makeup, it significantly increases your risk of developing some things and not others. And so it can be very helpful to see. And one of those is, absolutely being overweight, which obviously has issues both in terms of, your appearance and how you look and whether you're attractive and all that kind of stuff, but also in terms of obviously health outcomes, which, we know that you're much more likely to die younger, for instance, if you're significantly overweight. So, this is a big deal in every sense of the world, both for survival and reproduction. But having said that, the critics of the genetic theory will say, well, look, 100 years ago, hardly anyone was overweight. There were people who ate loads of sugar 100 years ago. They consumed a lot of calories 100 years ago. And yet somehow, hardly anyone was obese. So obviously it can't only be genetics. And I would say to that, yes, you're also right. So a tendency for a risk for being overweight absolutely is genetic. And there absolutely is a factor where for some people, it is way harder to lose weight than for others. That's true. For some people, it's actually really hard to gain weight. And I used to be one of those people because I had fairly significant digestive issues. At one point, I'm 6'3". At one point, I was 120 pounds. Not through dieting. That was while trying my best to gain weight, but because I had such severe digestive issues. And actually, all my life, I thought that I was just skinny because of genetics. My dad was always quite thin, but my mother was always quite overweight. But I thought, well, I must take after my dad, And then I got my genetic report, and in our system we have over 500 different genetic reports. Different people have different capacities, but so that's one of many. And it said you don't have a tendency to be underweight. In fact, you have a tendency to be normal weight. And I was like, well, that's not true, because my whole life I've been significantly underweight. But then another genetic report says, but you do have an issue with, you have a very high risk, like something like 98th percentile, so like top 2% most likely to have issues with digestion, specifically IBS. And you have like a top 2% risk for having hypothyroid, which is a thyroid issue, a glandular issue. And I worked out, well, I did have those things. And that was why I was so underweight. And once I resolved those issues, I suddenly put weight on, and now I'm 180 pounds, 6'3", just normal, not big, not small, just right in the middle. And so that's my side of going from very underweight to normal. But I've absolutely seen the opposite in many people I've worked with. Lady, for instance, like one of the craziest stories, lady who came to me, she was, maybe 50 pounds overweight, she would say. She also had like MS, extreme pain. Um, she had honestly one of the most challenging genetic profiles I've ever seen. So everyone has genetic weaknesses. I have them, you have them, the healthiest person you know has them. It's just sometimes they're not obvious, sometimes you don't see them, right? Overweight or skin issues you can see, maybe depression or chronic pain you can't see, but it's still obviously impacting the person's life heavily. But yeah, this person was quite compromised. And among all the many, many things it said that they had an increased genetic need for iron and vitamin, you guys say, B12. And so I gave her a lot of advice, and that was the least of it. I honestly didn't think it would make that much difference. But all she did is apply my advice about supplementing of iron and B12. And 2 to 3 months later, she said her MS had disappeared and she'd lost 40 pounds in weight. Now,
Wow.
does that happen every time? Absolutely not. Can I promise that will happen to you, listener? Absolutely not. But it's just an example. So in her case, I think what was happening is the thyroid, which is this little gland you have in your neck, controls what's called your metabolism. Your metabolism is the rate at which your body burns calories and turns them into energy, ATP. Some of the things that control that other than thyroid, your metabolism, is the rate of oxygen getting to your cells. And in order for the oxygen to get to your cells, you need enough iron and B12. So my theory with her is when she was very deficient in these things, she had it independently tested. I always encourage people, don't start taking stuff just based on what we say. It's always good to get our information first and then check with a doctor, which is what she did. But then she started supplementing with that stuff. And yeah, the weight just started falling off her. And it's not unheard of with B12 as well, neuropathy, which is a type of pain that affects the nerves, numbness and tingling. It can be a symptom of a B12 deficiency. So none of it was crazy, but it's just if you had told me beforehand that's all she'd need to do to lose that much weight, I never would have believed you. For some people, it's it's more significant. They've got to do more stuff. But just this idea that all you need to do is like restrict calories and exercise, I don't think it's true. I think, for example, hormones play a huge part. I know it's kind of a cliche these days to make fun of people who say, oh, I can't lose weight because of my thyroid. And they're like, you're just being lazy, you're just being gluttonous or whatever. But in my experience, that's not true. And the proof of that is if someone's thyroid is overactive, let's say if you were very overweight or I was very overweight, and then I got an overactive thyroid, the weight would fall off me and I wouldn't be able to keep weight on no matter how much I ate. That's what happens when you have a hyperactive thyroid. That's what it's called. So if that's true, which it is, medically undisputed, if you have a hyperactive thyroid, you cannot keep weight on. So if that's true, then these things are not binary. It's not like under, over, or normal. There's a spectrum, right? It's like, it could be very low, a little bit low, tiny bit low, normal, a little bit high, very high, etc. Right? So if your thyroid is a little bit high, you wouldn't be able to keep weight on. You'd be able to eat as much as you want all day. And I'll give an example about this from my very own wife. She's given me permission to talk about her. She did Ozempic a couple of years ago when it first came out, maybe a year and a half ago. And she went from 155 pounds down to, what was it? I'm just converting to pounds in my head. We think of kilos over usually. It was 155 pounds to 130, which is, great for her. But the problem was she was hardly eating anything. She felt cold all the time. She felt sick for quite a few days after having it. And she felt miserable. She was happy she was losing the weight, to be fair, but otherwise she felt miserable. And so after a couple of months, she was like, oh, I can't. She'd lost a lot of weight, but she's like, I can't keep doing this. I feel so sick. And I said, yeah, well, just stop then, by all means. And then, I can't remember exactly, maybe 6 months later or something, she kind of kept the weight off-ish. It kind of 2/3 of it came back maybe over time, something like that. And then she got on thyroid support. And she wasn't even that bad. She wasn't like medically low in thyroid. She just, went to see a doctor who helped her to optimize her thyroid. And now she's on an optimal amount of thyroid support. And now she's back down to 130 pounds. She can eat however much she wants, whenever she wants. It seems like she can't put on weight. She she like is busy around the house and she walks the dog, but she never exercises. She never does cardio. She never does resistance training. She never does anything like that. But her body's metabolism is working correctly, just like our ancestors were 100 years ago, to make that point. I think the average amount of calories that our ancestors ate, assuming they weren't in the middle of a famine or something like war rationing or something like that, was about 3,000 calories. So that's, the amount that she's having. She's having whatever she wants. She doesn't put on a pound of weight. So I've got many examples. Most of them I try not to say because I try not to give personal details, but that's like an example. She's given me permission. So it's, to me, the idea that all you've got to do is exercise more and eat less, and if you don't, you're gluttonous and lazy, is nonsense. I think there are stuff going on in our environment in the last 100 years that have suppressed our thyroid function. I also think that 200 years ago, a lot of us would eat a lot more food that naturally contained thyroids, whether it's like a whole chicken that has a little bit of thyroid in it, just eating, like the whole animal. These days, it's actually illegal to sell the gland of an animal that contains thyroid that has active thyroid hormone in, because it's classified as a drug. So you can go to a butcher and you can buy pancreas, spleen, intestine, heart, liver, you name it. You can buy every piece of an animal and eat it except for the thyroid gland. That's illegal. That's a medicine. And so I think maybe that has a part to it, but I think probably a bigger part of it is that, there's just all kinds of poisons that are affecting our thyroid and our metabolism in a negative way. And so suddenly people who maybe have always not been super active. I mean, exercise is a new concept. The idea of exercising for health, I think, was invented in like the 60s in California. I mean, people used to just work outside, doing manual labor and that a lot more often, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying like the idea of exercise is a new concept, and yet people didn't used to be overweight. So I think that there's something more to it. And I think we're being poisoned into being overweight, honestly. And I think, unfortunately, your country is one of the worst in terms of you guys are being poisoned, one of the most. And I think that's the reason that you guys are so likely to be obese. I don't think it's because you guys are lazy or whatever. I think you're, a pioneering country that in many ways is the greatest country in the world, brought lots of fantastic inventions. And I just think it's unfortunate that, the health situation that you guys have, especially, and we all have throughout the world, but especially, in the US.
Does the father's side or mother's side dominate your genetics? Does it matter? How's that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So to answer that question, I have to go a bit into genetics. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So our genetic code is kind of like code. So you ever seen like code, like the Matrix? You got all the ones and zeros, that kind of thing. So our genetic codes are similar. We just have four letters, A, G, T, H. And so our genes are just like lines of this code. And so this code kind of dictates our starting place in life. It is affected by our environment, but some things aren't, like things like your eye color or your hair color, all that kind of stuff. They're very unlikely change based on environment, your height, all that kind of stuff. Some things are more changeable. Anyway, what determines whether you're blue-eyed or brown-eyed or whatever is these differences in that genetic code. And when there is one small difference, so let's say, in the same place in the genes, my code says AATA and yours says AAGA. So that's one difference, right? And that's called a SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism, which we often shorten to SNP, SNP, SNP. And so those SNPs are a lot of what accounts for their variation between us. So when you use a service like ours that, based on your genetics will tell you all this stuff about your health and your well-being and your emotional life and all the rest, or whether you use a service like Ancestry, where they tell you, based on your genes, we think you're from Africa or you're Jewish or you're, German or whatever. When you use a service like that, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at these SNPs. And so to answer your question, if your parents have the same SNP, then you're definitely going to have that too. So if they both have an A at that point instead of, maybe a T or a G, whatever the other options are, if they both have it, that's called homozygous, and you're definitely going to have that too. So this is the case, usually if both your parents have blue eyes, you probably will. Well, if both of your parents have white skin, you probably will as well. There's exceptions, but not many, right? If they're heterozygous, so if one has one and one has the other, then you might get it from the father or you might get it from the mother. And that process of choosing which is expressed, I believe, is fairly random. Or if you want to put it down to God, it's down to that. But basically, there's no hard and fast rule of you will get it from your mother or you will get it from your father. It just depends.
The thing that worries me the most is that my grandmother on my father's side, she started to get really bad mental problems towards the end of her life. And then I noticed my father, actually at a younger age, was starting to get mental problems. And I'm worried that that's going to happen to me. Am I going to start getting dementia type symptoms? Would you be able to tell me that?
That's a great question. So what we can't do is we can tell you for sure, but we can give you a risk score. So we can say you're higher risk or lower risk. And that is one of the main reasons that people come to us, because they're concerned. Like for me, for instance, I said, one of my parents had cancer a lot. So I think, there's a reasonable chance that has been passed on to me. And so, yeah, for me, it was quite reassuring to get my genetic results and to see that I hadn't had that passed on to me, that high risk. So I was happy with that. Now, that still doesn't mean I'm not going to get it, but what that means is I don't have an elevated risk, if that makes sense. So now, with other things, they have been passed on to me. And so that is useful information to know. And so with our reports, I mean, cancer is kind of an exception, but with most of them, it doesn't just give you a risk score, it also gives you recommendations. And for instance, we do have an Alzheimer's report. And I know with that Alzheimer's report, there are recommendations. So Alzheimer's is in the same realm or world as heart disease. It's a cardiovascular issue. It's related to, a buildup of plaque. It's just that it's more a buildup of plaque in the brain as opposed to a buildup of plaque in the arteries. And so I think even mainstream medicine and certainly alternative medicine acknowledges there is something you can do about that, right? There are lifestyle, dietary, maybe supplement, maybe drug interventions, which will lower your chance of getting that. Now, the other thing is there are many, even though I just said, it's what's the word? Simple-ish, it's related to plaque building up. There are many reasons why that plaque could build up. And so the other thing that a service like ours helps is to kind of break down, could it be this gene that causes an elevated chance for plaque to build up? Or could it be a different gene? And so depending on what it is that gives you an elevated risk, if you have an elevated risk, the recommendations that we give you will change. So for one person, it may be, you need to eat less fat. For another person, it may be, you do well with foods that contain high levels of sulfur, or like you would do well with resveratrol, stuff found in red wine, or exercise is the most important for you, or for you the most important thing is to avoid smoking, or avoiding stress is the most important thing. Like it'll help you actually work out. And so that's good. I don't like to give advice to people that says you have an elevated risk of this. That's it. It's much better to say you have an elevated risk, but here's what you can do about it. And so that's what we do in the vast majority of cases anyway. Everything that we do is backed by 100% by science. It's all kind of FDA and FTC, not approved per se because they don't approve anything, but it's all compliant with their, statutes and all the rest of it. And every sentence that we have in reports always has a link to a study or several links to studies. So these are things that you could give to your doctor. And then also, in a case like yours, I would be looking at not just the Alzheimer's report, but I would be looking at all the kind of reports related to it. I'd be like, do you have increased tendency for LDL cholesterol? Do you have an increased tendency for, erythropoietin A? Do you have increased risk for, I won't go on, but, this or that, whatever, triglycerides, insulin resistance, like let's look into it and see if there's other things that we can look at. Because some people say that, issues like that, they all start with insulin. and insulin resistance. Other experts say, it's not that. It's more related to, cholesterol. Other people say it's different stuff. So we have reports on all that stuff as well. So you can dig into all of that. And this is often what I do if I work with people, but people can do it themselves using our platform if they like to, just to try and like work out what else is going on peripherally, like especially ideally a blood marker that I can find out about. If I have a genetic tendency to have a high level, then I can do an actual blood test. Sometimes doctors, often if you go to a normal doctor, they will only do the cheapest, easiest blood tests. But if you have some justification, if you say, look, genetically, I have a chance of having this important blood marker raised, then they'll be willing to run that test. Or you can always do it privately if they're still not willing. And then, you can work on those markers. Like a good one for Alzheimer's, I would say, is homocysteine. I don't know if that's something you ever had tested, but homocysteine is a very good marker for your chance of all kinds of health issues, cardiovascular health specifically, including Alzheimer's as well. And it's a blood marker that is very predictive. There's loads of science behind it. It's not unheard of. Like even normal medical doctors will sometimes include it in their battery of testing. And certainly if you go to, optimization type or, anti-aging doctor or whatever, they'll certainly do it. But the great thing about homocysteine is, so it's a big predictor of all these issues, but you can lower it if it's high, which it often is because of genetic factors primarily. You can lower it really simply just by taking B vitamins. That's it. Like this is not, you don't have to change your whole life. You don't have to stop eating steak. You don't have to start running an hour a day. Like you can literally take a supplement. And again, it's not always that easy, but sometimes it is. And so, I'd say anyone who's worried about Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease risk, I'd recommend, genetics, obviously, but I'd also recommend going to your doctor and asking to test homocysteine and, all the related markers, and then seeing what you can do to lower those markers yourself. And often it's not actually that difficult. The great thing about those kind of diseases is they're actually quite they're actually quite easy to remedy. Unlike things like cancer, which are a lot more difficult. The reason why they still take out like 50% of people is because they're the silent killer, meaning often by the time you notice it, because they're often symptomless, you're already pretty far gone. So to ask the question that you did of, I'm worried I might have it, like to do that testing now, whether it's genetic testing, whether it's blood testing or whatever, and find out, you're in such a better position to like reduce you can't say the word prevent because you never know 100%, but to significantly reduce your risk of that.
Is it science fiction or science fact that either today or in the future they could go in and change your genetics, your DNA?
It's science fact, yeah. It's already happening. For instance, there's people right now I can't remember, some Middle Eastern country offering follistatin gene therapy. And follistatin, basically, it stops the thing that stops your muscle being broken down. So basically, you can go in, you can have this gene therapy, and you basically grow much bigger muscles. And it's also supposed to have other impacts for longevity and all the rest of it. And they say it's safe because you can you can switch that gene back off if you want just by taking an antibiotic. So yeah, that's something that already exists. Do they have that gene therapy currently for things we probably want it more like cancer and all the rest of it? No, but they're working on it. And so yeah, and in that time, forewarned will definitely be forearmed sooner. But there'll be people, even when that's commonly available, there'll be people who still don't want to do it because of the risks, which is understandable because you want Frankenstein coming in there and messing with your genes, not necessarily right. So some people are still going to want to go, I'd rather just take B vitamins or whatever, like something that's a bit safer and more natural.
Well,
If that's an option.
People love getting plastic surgery and all that kind of stuff. If they're able to go in and change the way your eye color is, or your hair color and stuff like that, I'm sure there's going to be people in line to do that. Oh, I want a smaller nose. Well, I mean, isn't that part of your DNA, whether your nose is big or small? Maybe they'll be able to change that in the future.
Yeah, I don't know about changing size of nose, but certainly I think eye color wouldn't be too difficult. You would only have to mess with, I think, one gene, tyrosine hydroxylase, and you could yeah, change someone's eye color. So that would definitely be doable. I think with they probably wouldn't, even if it was possible for nose, they probably wouldn't do it because it's easier just to do plastic surgery than gene therapy.
Right.
But yeah, like in terms of having weight, yeah. But again, back to my story earlier, I would rather support someone's metabolism and thyroid function than like switch on or off some gene which artificially adjusted their weight. Um, because I don't know, I'd say it's cheating, or not cheating in the sense of like it's not fair, but more in the sense of cheaters never pay. Like whenever you make some adjustment, there's always going to be some backfiring that you can't always predict.
Right.
Whereas thyroid support, as I say, like as a medical intervention, it's been common 150 years. I would actually argue that it's been common throughout the ages because our ancestors have, often eaten the whole animals and prized organs, going back to hunter-gatherer times. So I would say it's pretty natural and pretty common to eat the gland of an animal, which is all, thyroid support actually is. So yeah, I'm a big fan of like advanced testing methods, like things that weren't available to us before. I'm familiar with like the old systems, whether it's the humors in the West, or Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine and all that. And I think sometimes they have useful insights, but I think a lot of the time they were doing their best with very little information. And I think it's great that we have, genetic testing and all these types of blood testing and all that. I think that's pretty cool. But the doing the cutting edge interventions feels riskier to me. I'd rather do the tried and tested ones personally. But I'm happy to hear from people who've done the latest stuff, like I mentioned with that follistatin gene therapy. I mean, I'm all ears. It's very interesting, but I wouldn't be first in line personally for that.
How much would this cost?
The follistatin, I can't remember. Was it 10,000 or $50,000, something like that. We're not talking cheap. It was some in the realm of five figures anyway. So yeah, this is not for the everyday person yet. I mean, the idea would be over time it will get cheaper and cheaper. But to be honest, taking growth hormone, which a lot of celebrities, athletes, models, etc., already do to change body composition, even that is at least $10,000 a year kind of cost, something like that. So a lot of people spend a lot of money on this stuff already. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not long before genetic manipulation is actually a cheaper option. As I just said, I wouldn't be first in line, but I understand it, And I mentioned like actors and models and the rest, because obviously, their paycheck will vary depending on how they look, so it's a bit more justifiable for them to do it. Or athletes, obviously, their paycheck will vary a lot depending on their body composition. But yeah, for people like you and I, um, but yeah, if you have a high genetic risk for Alzheimer's and you could switch off the gene that builds up plaque in your arteries, I can see that being very tempting, especially if you've already tried all the more natural, healthy alternatives and they haven't worked. But as I said, I think a lot of the time, the natural, healthy, tried and true methods, people haven't tried them. They just, a lot of the time they haven't heard of them. The doctors are not incentivized to recommend them. Although I work with some doctors are fantastic, but I just mean your everyday doctor um, generally only is aware of drugs and kind of dismisses everything else. But there are, plenty of doctors and doctor adjacent, functional medicine doctor, naturopathic doctor, all those kind of people who will be able to recommend lifestyle, supplement, dietary, interventions. Sometimes those things barely make a dent, I admit, but sometimes they make a massive difference. It just depends. And I would generally try to try all that stuff first if you have the luxury of, time to do that.
And how much does your service cost?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've tried to make it the most affordable by far, given the quality. That's one of the main reasons why I started our service. So I was helped by a different service that made a big difference in my life. And I was like, this is really cool, except for it's really complicated and it's quite expensive. So for people like yourself who just want to know about one specific element, like say cardiovascular health, I would put Alzheimer's in there, or let's say brain health. I mean, we have both. you can get a package for categories there, geneticinsights.co, and we're talking about like $55, $65, something like that. So we're talking not a lot. And yeah, I might as well mention it now. So for listeners of your podcast, I also am happy to offer a 25% discount code of VIBES, VIBES, capital letters. If you use that, geneticinsights.co, 25% off. So not expensive. One caveat to that is that's the price if you already have ever done a genetic test before. So if you've ever used Ancestry.com, 23andMe, any of those kind of services, you can take your data from there, you can upload it to our system. We have this incredible AI that has several dozen full-time scientists, several dozen full-time AI engineers. It'll crunch the data and it will give you this information, which from my experience, it's not foolproof. Like I just told you, I used an example earlier about it told me I have a genetic tendency to be normal weight and I was super skinny. I was like, that's not true. But as I said, it ended up actually being true. It's just I was skinny for a different reason. So sometimes there's stuff like that. It's not always 100% accurate for that reason, because life obviously will vary stuff. But in terms of the actual accuracy of the genetics, we guarantee 99.7. That's very accurate. And so if you've used that before, it's simple. If you haven't used that before, you need to get that raw DNA data. So you can either use a different service. Again, you're free to use any other of our competitors who do ancestry services. Get it with them first, see what their service is like, and then take your data and upload it to ours. I can guarantee you that our system is significantly better, but that's okay. You don't have to take my word for it. You can feel free to test it for yourself. That is a bit of a hassle though. So if you would prefer just the super easy version, then you can also get a DNA kit from us for about the same price. That's $99. And then not only will that then be automatically added to our system, so it's just easy, but you can also, if you want, download that data at any point you want and use anyone else's service, again, if you want to compare. So that's how that works. So yeah, the least you're going to pay, probably $55, $65. Now, if you want to have all the information, so I said we have like 500 reports, the very most you'll pay with us is $197. And that gives you access to over 500 reports on all kinds of topics from, whether you need if you have an increased need of any nutrient, any mineral, any vitamin, any amino acid, any essential fat, whether you have an allergy to any of the common allergens, over 200 health risks, over 100 genes, mental and emotional issues, depression, anxiety, personality stuff. Like there's a huge amount of stuff. I won't list it all, but it's on the website, geneticinsights.co. So that was one of my main missions, is like, this is really, really awesome, but half of the services out there you have to see a doctor for, which again, there's benefit to that potentially, but it just increases the cost significantly for a lot of people. So ours are user friendly enough, and I've got a few doctors. I want a few doctors over to our service, and number one thing they say is, "Oh, this is great. I don't need to explain the reports to people anymore. It just does it for you." So there's that benefit. And then, as I said, the other ones are actually good, and I'm not saying we're the only good one, but the other ones that are actually good are pretty expensive. So as far as I'm aware, ours is the most affordable, and then we offer the coupon code on top as well. So that's our main mission, is to take this incredible technology, which helped me, and just make it like in the realm of affordability to everyone.
It's a little more affordable than I expected. The website is geneticinsights.co.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are
Again,
y'all on?
rather than spending a lot of money on a .com, we saved that. We're passing that saving on to you.
Left the M off. Are y'all on social media?
Yeah, the main thing I have is my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Elwin Robinson. I have Instagram and stuff, but honestly, I never use those services, so it's not growing very much. But find me on YouTube. I answer all my comments on my videos, and I have loads of education there about everything. Hundreds of hours of free education. We try and make them topic-based. So, for instance, if you are interested in cardiovascular health or blood sugar or whatever, I've like an episode on each issue that you might be interested in. So, yeah, if you want to check out my take on any particular issue, then I've probably got a video about it on my channel.
I will put all those links in the description just to make it easier for folks. But Elwin, thank you so much for coming on. This was enlightening.
Awesome. Thank you. Great questions.
Appreciate it, man. And I also appreciate all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. For my regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network